after one of the most asinine, wild, entertaining, for sure roller coaster ride of an NFL season, and only fitting because it was the 100th season of the National Football League, we are finally here. We are finally down to 2. We are at Super Bowl 54, San Francisco 49ers, Kansas City Chiefs, and we now have an historic matchup. We now have the final game of the season, and we now have this asinine, entertaining, drama-filled roller coaster ride of a season that's very fitting for the NFL's 100th season coming to a close. So, despite the Steelers not being there and the Steelers season actually having ended weeks ago, even before the playoffs, with their off-season news being Bill Cowher's induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I still felt it was fitting to do a Super Bowl 54 preview show here for Pittsburgh Sports Live, and despite, again, throughout the Now Network of our Steelers coverage, kind of taking a break as we focus elsewhere with teams that are still active in their season, I felt like it would be a good excuse to provide some content to Steelers Now, as well as here Pittsburgh Sports Live, and to preview Super Bowl 54. Although, before we get there, and while we're there, I will also touch on Rod Goodell's State of the NFL address this week, and some NFL news that surrounds a former Pittsburgh Steeler to still kind of make it topical to Steelers Now. This is another episode of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. This broadcast of Mic Drop is going to be made possible thanks to Beaver County Auto and, of course, Pittsburgh Sports Live. And still for this one, even though it's a Super Bowl preview show without the Steelers, SteelersNow.com. I am your host, Mike Asti. There it is, under the nameplate there. You can find me on Twitter at MikeAsti11. You can find us on Twitter ourselves there at the Outlaw, at PGH Sports Live on Twitter, and of course at PGH Steelers Now also on Twitter. Now, as I sit here in a home studio of sorts with my stove space heater behind me to keep me cool here, as you can probably guess, I'm in the basement of my house. It's Super Bowl week. Now, Super Bowl week this year, of course, and this isn't going to be that show, was marred by the tragic news of Kobe, NBA legend and really global icon Kobe Bryant's passing. That was topical there for Super Bowl Media Day / night now. It's more towards the evening this day and age. But there was some crazy news surrounding the NFL, or at least a former NFL player, as he's currently not an active NFL player. He's somebody that we actually used to cover on Steelers Now. Now, we don't now, no pun intended, because he's no longer a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and actually we can't even legitimately throw it into around the NFL section. And I don't enjoy this, I don't find this funny, but it's just a fact. He's not a member of the National Football League. However, Roger Goodell did have to touch on Antonio Brown. He did touch on Antonio Brown in his little press conference there during Super Bowl Media Week, in which he made it clear that his focus now is Antonio Brown's well-being, his mental health. This is the same guy that months earlier made it pretty clear, pretty crystal clear, that if any team signed Antonio Brown, especially during the week of practice and that whole hoopla around his potential tryout with the New Orleans Saints where he brought his camera crew, that if anyone signed AB, he'd be put on the commissioner's exempt list. You wouldn't be able to play him. It was clear, whether it was public or not, whether there was public messages or not, that the NFL front office from the top down didn't want anyone to touch Antonio Brown. After the Raiders debacle, after that drama, following what happened with the Steelers, which was highly detailed here on Pittsburgh Sports Live last season, even before SteelersNow.com existed, And then his little brief stint with the Patriots, and of course the criminal allegations and sexual assault, and all of that matriculated, and then all the drama with Antonio Brown since, that nobody should touch AB. We'll worry about next year when it gets here. Commissioner exemplist. No one did end up signing him, despite who he thinks maybe was interested. But now, and this is on the heels of an arrest, this is on the heels of him evading the police for a couple days, of him throwing rocks at a moving company, about getting locked in his house, getting arrested, having a judge chastise him. This is a week or so after he threw Juju Smith-Schuster under the bus and started making fun of him for his bad season, which I touched on in a past show. Admittedly was a bad season. He needs to be way better. He deserves criticism. But AB still looked like an ass clown for bringing that up at this time when he's not even in the league, and this is supposed to be a guy that he was mentoring while they were teammates on the Steelers. And now it's all about Antonio Brown's well-being. It's all about his mental health. Okay? That's all it's about right now. There it is. Go for me and Rappaport there on the subject of AB investigation. Commander Goodell says the most important point is that what's best for Brown and his personal well-being. And this is a legit quote. We want to help him get on the right track. We want to work to do that. That's the first step. And you can read my little tweet there, my little quote tweet. Some didn't like this, but again, this is just keeping this real. Keeping it real as I always will. Getting arrested has actually been a positive for Antonio Brown in his relationship with the NFL, at least Roger Goodell. The focus has now shifted from possible punishments, if he was back in the league and exempless he'd be put on, to his mental well-being. It's true. It's odd. Now, you don't want to get arrested, most of us who are sane, and this may become legal problems for him. I highly doubt he spends time in jail, despite the rumors out there and lawyers saying that it could be life in prison. That's just not going to happen. But say he even faces time in prison. Say he's convicted. He's still a relatively young man. When that's over, Michael Vick, this happened with him, he could find himself back in the National Football League. But in reality, say that doesn't happen. The NFL's main focus now is his mental well-being. Same with the judge. They want him to get a mental health check. They want him to be evaluated mentally. They want to make sure he doesn't have a mental illness, which I feel like we all agree he probably does have. They want to focus in on that first. And I'm not here to say that's wrong or bad by any means. But it's just weird to me because this scenario of now the NFL focusing on his mental well-being, of even the judge focusing on his mental well-being, which may end up getting him away from certain punishments. It may be all about his mental health, which is legit. I'm not saying mental health isn't a serious thing. It certainly is. But it's oddly maybe going to get AB off scot-free in a way. Okay? He could get back in the National Football League after he's done with their whatever criminal investigation. Say, hypothetically, that doesn't go anywhere on the sexual assault accusations. Separate from the assault and separate from what just went down in Florida. Then he's back in the NFL, his all-world talent, his Hall of Fame talent. Someone's going to want him if they know he can play in the NFL. The Saints kind of basically said they would have wanted him if he could play. They didn't think he could. Is it possible the NFL doesn't put him on the exempt list? Doesn't punish him further? It's like they have several other athletes throughout the years. Regardless of what happens in the legal court system, they punish them on their own. They can do whatever they want because they're the shield. Because they're going to just throw this to the mental health. Now, he does need mental health help. But for all of you who claim this is just CTE or this is just mental health and you want to wrap it in a bow and throw that as an excuse for Antonio Brown, that's unfair. That's unfair to those who legitimately have that problem, who legitimately can blame that. Antonio Brown has proven time and time again, and I'm not saying mental health isn't part of this, that he's just a selfish, bad dude. All he cares about is himself. He doesn't care who he brings down around him. He's an egomaniac who just wants the attention more than really even being in the NFL. He wants that limelight. And he's willing to do whatever he has to ruin others for the weird benefit of himself when it doesn't even really benefit himself. There's different mental issues there. And he does need help. And again, I don't want to poo-poo that and say he shouldn't be helped. But it actually could end up being a blessing in disguise by forcing all of this and maybe getting him off certain punishments in the NFL. That just seemed odd to me. Okay? That's almost a funny part of this, that AB might have been better off finally having something happen in which he gets arrested. And if you don't believe me, just talk to past teammates of his. Ryan Clark said it all over ESPN. Jeff Reed said it to me on my old Trib show. I threw it here on Pittsburgh Sports Live because I, wink, wink, own that content from the past. And Jeff Reed made it clear. Jeff Reed made this clear, even years ago, that when they were teammates way, way, way back, he saw glimmers of this. It isn't just the perfect hit. It isn't just mental health now, unless that's been a problem forever that no one ever knew of. And I'm not saying that's impossible, but this guy has been a selfish, bad dude. And once he got the money, once he got the stature, once he had the resume, he let it get out of control and he didn't need anybody anymore in his mind. Listen back to that interview. Quick. It's a 3-minute blurb there on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Steelers Now. Listen to it. Soak it in. Jeff Reed made it clear this is who Antonio Brown was even 10 years ago. It isn't just a few years ago. It isn't just the perfect hit. It isn't a new development of AB. This is the AB he knew a decade ago. Now, I will digress here and move off of Antonio Brown to another topic here. This will be before I get to the Super Bowl preview show, but another topic of Roger Goodell's media session, another topic of Super Bowl week in terms of the Rooney Rule. Now, I want to make this clear as well. I agree the Rooney Rule hasn't been used to the best of its ability. It hasn't been legit for many. It hasn't efficiently worked. It hasn't done what the hope of it was. Because there are many qualified African American assistant coaches who haven't been given the opportunities they should have. Now, granted, there were African American coaches of the past, like Marvin Lewis, who was able to linger around much longer than he should have, but that wasn't because of anything with race. That was because of the franchise. But there are African Americans who certainly haven't got their just due and haven't got the opportunities. There's been a retread of white coaches that probably didn't deserve all the opportunities they were provided. And for sure, there are teams that are just interviewing African Americans to fulfill the Rooney Rule obligation with really no idea and really no thought in hiring them. Just doing it to avoid a fine, to avoid losing draft picks, to avoiding a problem with the National Football League, and fulfilling that obligation. Okay? And that sucks. It does. It absolutely sucks. But there's nothing more that can be done. And I'm not here to say that why not try in terms of race relations, because racism is obviously horrible and it's one of the worst things that can happen, and it still is unfortunately prevalent in this country, even though we have come a long way in some respects. But you can only force teams to conduct an interview. And even if you conduct an interview with somebody knowing you're not going to hire them, that still can be a positive for that guy. It gets his name out there that otherwise wouldn't have been the case. It gets him some recognition. It gets him maybe that another team would want to hire this man because his name's out there and you kind of get a more researching of this person. If he's interviewed for this position from this one team, another team may say, okay, we'll try. We'll take a look at him later when our job's open. So that's a positive. It has done that, and it has provided African-American head coaching jobs. The Pittsburgh Steelers have an African-American head coach who's won a Super Bowl after being an assistant under an African-American. Mike Tomlin under Tony Dungy, then won a ring with John Gruden, a white coach. He then eventually got the head coach job with the Steelers and won a championship his own self. That's helped. It's helped things throughout the history of the National Football League that probably wouldn't have without the Rooney Rule. It shouldn't have to be. It has done some positive things, and it can do some positive things. It can help you to just get interviewed, even if you're not going to get the job. But you wish it could be more than that. You wish it wouldn't be anybody interviewing for jobs they really aren't going to get, and that people aren't just checking a box to try to fulfill an obligation. But what else can be done? Roger Goodell basically just vaguely saying we're going to do things, we're going to adjust things, we're going to look at it, we need to do more, the rule isn't working. I mean, we can agree with all of that, but everybody clamoring for a change to the rule, I have never seen anybody come up with actually a solution, with actually a way to adjust this rule. Because you absolutely can't force a team to hire somebody. You can't say you must fulfill a quota of African Americans as head coach as long as there's qualified assistants out there. You wish that would be the case, but you can't force a team, an owner, a franchise, anybody to hire somebody they don't want to hire. An owner's paying the bills. He's the one who owns the team. It's his team. As much as fans would love to decide who gets hired for jobs, they can't. Neither can anybody. Even the NFL body itself cannot force an owner to hire somebody, nor should they, even if that was a possibility. You'd love to have everything be fair and hunky-dory and butterflies, rainbows, and unicorns in terms of race relations. It isn't, it should, and it sucks. But what else can be done in terms of the Rooney Rule? Nothing. It sounds bad to say it. It sucks to say it. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's just the truth. There's nothing else that can be done. You can't force anyone to hire anybody. You can't force a quota to be fulfilled because you can't force anyone to hire anybody, nor should you. If a team wants to hang a coach around for 15 years despite not winning a playoff game and having a roller coaster ride with a lot of bad seasons mixed in, Marvin Lewis should have been fired a long time ago. They can, and that was a minority who was able to linger. There's been white coaches let go after a year. That's probably not fair to anybody because you need a year, especially with a bad team, to fix things at least. It's a what have you done for me lately league. No one really gets opportunities. Yes, Jason Garrett lasted a long time. Marvin Lewis lasted a long time. They should have maybe got fired earlier. But those are the minority situations now in today's social media era. But regardless and separate from all of that, you just can't force anybody to hire somebody they don't want to hire. So as much as I would love to see the Rooney Rule work better and more efficiently, I haven't heard Roger Goodell or anybody out there, no one on Twitter certainly, tell me what can be done to fix the Rooney Rule, to make the Rooney Rule better and make it more effective. Because I hate to say nothing else can be done. You can require an interview, that's all. If a team wants to lie and dot all their I's and cross all their T's and fulfill all the legal obligations but not really want to hire somebody, in the back of their mind, they're not going to hire that guy. What can you do? Can you read their mind and force that outside of force them to a lie detector test? I don't know what can be done. In fact, nothing can be done. Now, as we kind of touched on the news stories there and the state of the NFL as we know it as we close what was, again, maybe the most asinine NFL season, at least for off-the-field news, I do want to kind of close this with a Super Bowl 54 preview. The Steelers are not in this game. This is Steelers Now. This is a Pittsburgh Sports Live. This is Pittsburgh Sports Media. This is a Pittsburgh outlet. There's no one even close to the Pittsburgh market there. It's the Kansas City Chiefs and San Francisco 49ers. But regardless, let's preview this a little bit. Let's get the Buffalo Chicken Dip ready, and I'm going to have that on Sunday night to watch the game. That's my favorite little snack for big games. And let's talk some Super Bowl, okay? This also now comes a week after my birthday. I will give some dap to me, and I received A pineapple upside down cake again. I've got this numerous years. It's almost become a staple of my birthday. A staple of the Mike Asti birthday is pineapple upside down cake. My girlfriend, beautiful girlfriend, lovely girlfriend, made that for me. It was one of the best ones I've had, so definitely happy about that. I've aged another year, and I'm still as asinine as ever, still producing Radio Gold, so that's going to be my brushing my shoulders off there to wrap up my birthday week. And my birthday used to fall on Super Bowl Sunday every now and then. I remember the story actually my mom always told me of my birthday interrupting my dad's Super Bowl party, and my dad and his friends kept saying, no, he's not really, you're not really having labor right now. He's not going to really be born right now. And then her forcing, yep, it's happening now. They go to the hospital, and there was me around noon the next day. But now it's the first week in February. It's kind of adjusted itself. So now it's no longer around my birthday time, but it's the week after, and now it is Super Bowl Sunday. Nonetheless, the Kansas City Chiefs making their first appearance as a franchise since Super Bowl IV. Hank Stram winning it, and that's really the positive of the Chiefs franchise. They appeared in an AFC title game with Joe Montana in the early 90s, but there were some Tony Gonzalez playoff appearances, but they didn't win a playoff game with him. He didn't even get his first playoff victory until he went to Atlanta. So this Chiefs team has been relatively mediocre, okay? Much like the Jets, for example. They've been relatively mediocre, but that one championship back in the early 70s, Super Bowl IV, has made it a historic franchise. But now the Chiefs, with for my money, even with Lamar Jackson's season, the best quarterback in the league, Patrick Mahomes, leading the way, that high-powered offense, Kelsey there at tight end, a really versatile threat overall, and a pretty solid defense, too. And Andy Reid, again, for my money, a Hall of Fame head coach, looking for that first championship as a head coach. They're there, and they're facing off against Jimmy Garoppolo, and the San Francisco 49ers. Jimmy G not having to do nearly as much as Patrick Mahomes, guy who can throw 10 passes and win games thanks to their running game. Kind of an upstart running game, but now a pretty one-dimensional team. A better defense, one of the best teams all year. They deserve to be there. Richard Sherman and company, him looking for his second ring in his third Super Bowl appearance. The other two with Seattle. And that secondary, just such a threat, just such a dangerous situation to be able to throw against that secondary. As great as Mahomes is, can he deal with that secondary will be a major question. Will he throw away from Sherman? Will they be able to generate turnovers? That's usually what the Niners defense has done all year. Although they didn't really do it against the Steelers. The Steelers generated the turnovers, couldn't convert points off of it, and probably should have beat San Fran. But again, I'll digress. And the Niners have been the best team all year, certainly in the NFC. So they deserve to be here. The Chiefs probably should have been there last year if it wasn't for the Patriots kind of ending their dynasty with them the championship. And this kind of makes, I'll give full disclosure, I don't care about either one of these two teams, but I am in a way rooting for the Chiefs. I'd like to see Andy Reid get that championship as a head coach, winning a ring with the Packers as an assistant back in 96, Favre's ring year. But hasn't done it as a head coach yet. Lost to the Patriots with the Eagles in his one appearance. Lost all those NFC title games with Philadelphia. Lost the AFC title game last year against the Patriots. And now he's there with the best quarterback in football, the best tight end in football, one of the best defenses in football, a veteran, hungry team, weapons all around, has now a 1.5-point Vegas favorite, I believe. Yep, here it is. Thanks to a recent bet, the money line has shifted now where Chiefs are a 1.5 favorites. So throw your money down, maybe switch that off. But the Chiefs, I thought it would be San Fran, but the Chiefs are a 1.5 favorite as we currently stand. And the question's going to be, can the one-dimensional 49ers, who, unlike the Chiefs, who franchise making its first Super Bowl appearance in Super Bowl IV, looking for only a second championship and second appearance, San Francisco 49er franchise, of course, not with this group, but has been filled with history in terms of success. We know the Joe Montana time, 4 rings for him, 4 championships, 4 Super Bowl appearances, Super Bowl MVPs. Jerry Rice with 3 rings of his own right. The Bill Walsh era and ushering in the 80s 49ers. Steve Young's title in 94 with that star-studded group on both sides of the ball. Dion even there before going to Dallas. And a Super Bowl appearance for the Niners back in 2012 with Colin Kaepernick in that season, losing to Baltimore with Jim Harbaugh as the head coach against his brother. So this Niners franchise is much more familiar with this moment and this. They've won 5 Super Bowls. Chiefs only the one. They've been there within the last decade. The Chiefs haven't been there in 40-plus years. So it's a little different in terms of hunger. The Chiefs much hungrier of a franchise. But also, to me, the deserving favorite, the better team, and the team that's going to win this game. For two main reasons. Number one, that man right there talking to Andy Reid, that's going to eventually be two Hall of Famers, okay? Number one, Andy Reid, yes, there's some clock management issues, but he's the better coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach. We talked about this opening the show. Bill Cowher getting in the Hall of Fame. Took him some years, but he gets into the Hall of Fame now. Him and Jimmy Johnson both interrupted during their pregame shows on CBS and Fox. Get the announcement there from Dave Baker, and they're going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And based on who's in and based on the coaches that are deserving and the resumes that are there, they're both deserving. They've done the body of work comparison who's already in the Hall of Fame. So whatever you think of them getting in, there are worse coaches and worse resumes already in, and similar resumes to them will get in. And I talked about this on a recent show, too. Bill Cowher getting in means Mike Tomlin will be there. The rubric pretty much has become that one championship, 130-plus wins, gets you into the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a head coach at minimum. Jimmy Johnson has the 2 rings, built up the Cowboys, built up that dynasty, wasn't there in 95 when Barry Switzer won it, but he basically was still, that team was still the team that he built, so he kind of was still the quasi-head coach. And had enough wins down the line. Bill Cowher, 160-plus wins, all the AFC title appearances. Did lose some of those big games, did miss some playoffs, but 2 Super Bowl appearances, the 1 ring. You base on who's already in. Based on who's already in the Hall of Fame, they deserve it. Mike Tomlin, the wins, the ring, the 2 appearances, the division titles, the above 500 record, he's going to get there. John Harbaugh's probably going to get there. Sean Payton's probably going to get there. Mike Holmgren, who's a candidate, is probably going to get there. Mike Shanahan with the 2 rings, despite that being the Elway, Terrell Davis, Broncos, and then not as much after that. The wins were there. They were piled up. He's probably going to get there. And Andy Reid's right with them. And if they're all there, as much as they've done what they had to do and they deserve it based on who's already in the Hall of Fame, whether you like it or not, they have the wins, they have at least the 1 ring, and Andy Reid doesn't have the ring yet. This is his now second Super Bowl appearance, having been there now from both conferences. But Andy Reid has more wins, and here's Andy Reid's number here. Look at this, folks. 21 years in the National Football League, 207 victories, a 618 win percentage. 207 wins, a 618 win percentage. That's getting into Don Shula territory. Now, Don Shula has an undefeated season, multiple championships, and all the other Super Bowl appearances from the Baltimore Colts and Miami Dolphins. But look at the body work. That's 2 teams for Reid as well, 2 different teams leading to the Super Bowl. He hasn't won it yet, but he ran into the Patriots dynasty. He ran into some great teams in the early 2000s with the Eagles, even in the NFC, with that great defense in Tampa, the greatest show on turf in the Rams. Yes, they probably should have beat Carolina, and I'm not excusing him for losing some of those big games with star players. He did lose some big games. Cowher did as well, though. Cowher lost some big games he shouldn't have lost. He got upset in some of those big games. And yet he ended up with 1 ring. He ended up with enough wins, and he ends up getting in the Hall of Fame. And he basically doubles Jimmy Johnson's win total. Yeah, Jimmy Johnson has the back-to-back championships, and Andy Reid lost, but he's now taken 2 teams to the Super Bowl. And win or lose, Andy Reid should be there. The wins are enough. Multiple appearances in the big game usually get you there. Marv Levy is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame with 4 Super Bowl appearances and the wins, despite not having won any of those games. So Andy Reid's probably going to get there anyway. But winning a championship would solidify it, and his resume would then automatically be better than a lot of the guys who are already there. Now, in addition to Andy Reid being the better coach, and at least that's where my heart is, kind of wanting this for him, it's this other guy in the image, okay? It's this. It's Patrick Mahomes. He's the best quarterback in the game, and often the best quarterback wins this game. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football. He has the cannon for an arm. He has the Brett Favre cannon for an arm. He has the gunslinger mentality. He'll do whatever he has to make a play. But he's more athletic, smarter with the football, and way less careless than Favre. So he's a more athletic, smarter Brett Favre. Pretty damn good right now in the National Football League. Already has an MVP. Took his team to the AFC title game last year. Now in the Super Bowl this year. It seems like his time to own this league, especially with maybe the end of the Patriots dynasty. He can throw the check down. He has the underneath threat. He has some deep threats. They don't have what the Niners have in terms of running game, but they have enough of a running game. They don't have what the Niners have in terms of a defense, but they have enough of a quality defense. And Patrick Mahomes in that ability is facing off against a really high-touted Niners defense. But while it's a strong defense all around, especially in the secondary, he's going to throw away from Sherman. He's going to avoid Sherman, take him out of the game, go to the other side. It'll make it one-dimensional. It'll make it easier on him. And he's elite. He's good enough that he won't be just beat down from a great defense. He's faced great defenses to this point. He knows how to get rid of the football. Unless he just totally implodes Brett Favre's style and makes mistakes, he's going to score enough points against that Niner defense and move the ball enough. In contrast to San Fran, who has Jimmy G, who's thrown some yards, under 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns. But if you're looking at what he's done in the playoffs, they become a very one-dimensional team, okay? And yes, he's learned from Brady, and he's won a championship as a backup already, and I'm not saying he can't potentially do enough to win games. He's now giving you a very similar body of work in terms of how he plays, how he carries himself, how this team is built, to how Brady was with the early 2000s Patriots when he won 3 championships out of 4 years in the early 2000s before they went on that undefeated season and then the other dynasty late in his career and became an elite, became the greatest quarterback of all time. He was more of a game manager back then when they were winning. And Garoppolo's mirroring that a little bit. But it's even less than that in terms of what he has to do. And if they bring you the same team, the same style, the same game plan from the NFC title game where it's just all running on the ground, and yes, you stick with it if it's working, but that Chiefs defense good enough to key in on a one-dimensional team and to snuff out a one-dimensional team, to stop a one-dimensional team. If you have to tell me in a close game, and this appears to be a close game, a relatively evenly matched game, which one of these two teams will be better equipped to win in a comeback, to hang on their quarterback and have their quarterback carry them through a close game late in the fourth quarter or throughout, it's easily the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. It's easily that guy. It's easily those two Hall of Famers talking on the practice field leading up to Super Bowl week. It's easily Patrick Mahomes over Jimmy G. He's had to do it. He's proven it already in those games, in big games. Jimmy G hasn't had to, and it's hard for me to see that first time doing it, if he has to, is going to be against this Chiefs team, is going to be in Super Bowl 54. If that Niners team gets behind, they're in trouble. That Chiefs team can score enough points, build enough lead, and have a good enough defense to stop them, especially if they're that one-dimensional. If the Niners get up, the Chiefs can come back. And yes, the Niners defense is strong enough to hold on to a lead, but they're not going to totally stop. They maybe can contain, but not totally stop that Chiefs offense with Mahomes. So I'm clinging to the best quarterback in the game. I'm clinging to the better coach, the Hall of Fame coach in the game, and I'm going to cling to, and I'm going to pick the team with the more versatile offensive game plan, the more complete team overall. And I get how great the Niners have been all year, but they become very one-dimensional. They become easier to scheme against. And that one-dimensional style, if you get up in games, sure. But if the Chiefs score early, if they have a couple touchdown lead, which is possible, they scored 50 points in a playoff game. I get they had to come back and they were down 20 plus, but they ended up doing it. That team can come back. I don't see the Niners coming back. And I do see the Chiefs being able to hold a significant lead against San Fran because they're not built to come back. They're built to jump out to an early lead and hold on to it and do it on the ground, churn the clock, and have Jimmy Garoppolo just manage the game and not make the mistakes. That Chiefs team is built to come back, but also score enough, and they're just going to score enough to make it a problem for the Niners. So I am going Kansas City. I am going Kansas City and winning this game. I do think it'll be very, very close, though. I wouldn't be shocked at all if San Fran won. That's my analysis for why the Chiefs would win. But if San Fran wins, of course, it probably will be that they got a lead early. It probably will be they were able to create some turnovers. It probably will be that Patrick Mahomes had a little bit too much of a Brett Favre game and tried to do too much. Maybe Andy Reid will make a bad clock management decision. Wouldn't shock me. He's done it before in big games. He has all of them resume, but that's why he hasn't won yet. Or maybe they get a big enough lead early, and then they can just really churn and ground and pound and hold on to that football and end up winning the game. That wouldn't shock me either. And speaking of the Hall of Fame, a championship for the Niners, or really even being there, really puts Richard Sherman in another stature. I mean, this is a guy who's become a hired gun in the NFL, almost Deion Sanders style, where he's won already with the Seahawks. He's been to 2. This will be his 3rd appearance. He was an elite corner then. He's never been just on teams that win, because teams win championships, not individuals, especially not corners. They can't do it on their own. But he's been a key member who saved his career now with the Niners, and this really would bolster his Hall of Fame resume, which he's already going to be in Canton someday, but this would really bolster that all-time ranking, no matter what Darrelle Revis may say. And Revis was a better overall corner, more of a shutdown corner, of course. But this really helps Sherman's case as well and bolsters that resume if the Niners do win. Even being there helps him because many thought his career was over 2 years ago. The Seahawks did. But we'll see if he can generate a turnover. If the Niners win this game, I'm going to say the MVP is either on the ground, is either the running back or somebody on the defense. Maybe even Richard Sherman gets lucky, or maybe on the other side of the football if they throw away from him, there's a turnover, there's an interception over there. That's very, very possible if the Niners would win. If the Chiefs win, it's Patrick Mahomes hands down. If the Chiefs win Super Bowl 54, it's Patrick Mahomes as a Super Bowl MVP almost guaranteed, hands down. That'll be a 250-plus yards at least, if not 330, 350-plus yards. Probably 3 touchdowns, maybe a pick, but it wouldn't matter. That'll be a spread for Patrick Mahomes. If the Chiefs win, Patrick Mahomes is a guarantee for Super Bowl MVP. Okay? Guaranteed. And I do think they will, so that's where I would lean if I had to make a prediction here. Now, as I kind of wrap things up, and I guess that kind of puts a bow on this official NFL season. It was our first at SteelersNow.com in terms of in-game coverage. Alan and I going to the games, bringing you the in-game analysis, the in-game post-game coverage, live in the locker room, post-game shows that I put up on PSL, all the news, notes, analysis during those games and live blogs. We're going to keep that moving here into the offseason with the draft coming up, NFL calendar year that really goes all the way through even after the Super Bowl. Mini camp, training camp, all the way through to next season. We'll be back with you again at SteelersNow.com. Make sure to follow us at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter and find us on Facebook, Steelers Now there on Facebook. Regardless of the Steelers, though, the rest of the Now Network still churns and moves right now. PittsburghSportsNow.com, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, WV Sports Now, covering the Mountaineers and down there in West Virginia. The Mountaineers, certainly a tournament team, certainly looking like a top 2, 3 seed at worst in the NCAA tournament, maybe a Big 12 tournament type of team in terms of Big 12 tournament champions. They're a top 15 ranked team. Bob Huggins adding some wins to his Hall of Fame resume. I've done shows on them throughout here on the channel of Pittsburgh Sports Live, but also can be found WVSportsNow.com. So definitely follow up on the Mountaineers. Even if you're a Pittsburgh fan who hates WVU, venture over. The Pittsburgh outlets do cover West Virginia. They're in the Pittsburgh media market, but we also know there's a lot of Pittsburgh fans here in this market, living in this city. So find the Mountaineer coverage there, WVSportsNow.com, Pittsburgh Sports Now for Pitt and beyond, all through high school and all the smaller colleges throughout Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Hockey Now clearly in the midst of Penguin season, and they're looking really, really good with Crosby back. Maybe another playoff run is very, very possible, certainly. And maybe a Mike Sullivan, Jack Adams award type season, certainly very, very possible, despite the goalie controversy going on there with the Penguins. Pittsburgh Soccer Now, obviously. And make sure you keep checking in here, SteelersNow.com, PGHSportsLive.com as well. Maybe more things happening with Pittsburgh Sports Live in the channel, more editions, more shows, maybe moving into the post-game show route for WVU, maybe Pitt, maybe the Penguins throughout, especially going into the playoffs. And we'll still be here with Steelers coverage when the news hits, when news are up. So maybe check back in on Antonio Brown. Either way, it was a wild, it was an asinine, it was entertaining, it was drama-filled, it was just as it's supposed to be in the National Football League. It was the 100th season, and it was all of those things, and then some, maybe more than ever before, which makes sense and is very fitting for the 100th season in the National Football League's history. This is Super Bowl 54, an historic Super Bowl nonetheless. Will the Chiefs win their second, their first since the early 70s, since Super Bowl IV, so their first in 50 years. Will Mahomes get his ring? Will Andy Reid finally get his ring? Will that Chiefs franchise solidify themselves as more than just a mediocre franchise since Hank Stram? Will the Niners get that first title since Steve Young in the mid-90s, even though they've been there back in 2012? Will they add to the mystique and the history of that illustrious franchise? Will Richard Sherman get a second ring? Will Jimmy G win one as a starter? And I will also say the Patriots don't regret getting rid of him, or shouldn't, because they won a championship and been to a couple with Tom Brady after that trade. So that kind of puts that to bed, even though obviously Jimmy G would be better for the future and Brady's not going to be there any longer. You're not going to trade that championship, and I don't know if Jimmy G, at least for me, wasn't ready to lead that team to back-to-back Super Bowl appearances and one ring the last 2 years. So you probably wouldn't have had that. You're not going to regret a championship for the future, even for an historic franchise. But regardless of what happens in Super Bowl 54, regardless who wins, regardless who's the MVP, regardless of what controversy probably will erupt from the game, it's going to all be covered, and it's going to all be around throughout the Steelers offseason now after the game, because it'll kick into full gear at SteelersNow.com. Follow us on social, Pittsburgh Sports Live on Facebook, PGH Sports Live on Twitter. Well, they're WV Sports Now, but they're PGH Sports Live on Twitter and at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter as well. You can find me on Twitter. There's the nameplate at Mike Asti 11 on Twitter. And as I enjoy the stove of heat behind me in my little home studio here, I will enjoy my buffalo chicken dip. I enjoyed my pineapple upside down cake, and I will enjoy everything that's been this NFL season, this 100th NFL season, what will be in the future of our coverage, as well as the NFL and around the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the rest of what we're doing with the Now Network, because a lot more to announce, and a lot more things happening than maybe you realize right now. I will also enjoy my buffalo chicken dip and Super Bowl 54. So this has been the off-season kind of wrap-up of bizarre news and also Super Bowl 4 preview show here right on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Again, hit us up on our family of networks, Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, WVSportsNow.com, and SteelersNow.com. I'm Mike Asti, and this, as I'm even 1 year older and still doing it strong, has been a Radio Gold edition of Mic Drop right here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and SteelersNow.com. Thanks in part to Beaver County Auto.